All right, guys, hopefully this one will work a little better here on the rainy Hurricane Matthew Saturday. Wanted to finish this yesterday, but my lovely former students on fall break all thought it would be a good time to come when I was trying to do this. So we're going to pick it up from here. We covered China. We're in the ancient religion and philosophy unit, where we talked about legalism, strict efficiency, and harsh punishments will restore order. Human laws are above heavenly virtues. We then transferred to Confucianism, which says that everybody has a role to play, a superior and an inferior role, and he broke things down into 5 relationships, filial piety. Now he, again, did not consider himself an innovator, but he was a teacher, and his students wrote everything down in a work called the Analects, where it says that government workers should be good moral men who understand what the right thing to do is. Commoners don't know this, but they could be made to follow a good example. The best example are the emperors who start the new dynasties, who aren't afraid to get in there. They value hard work, devotion to duty, and family. If everybody can understand that, harmony in society will prevail. Which then takes us to Taoism, which simply said that no, people stand around waiting for someone to solve the problem. They wait for one of those sage kings to come to power, when instead you just need to do it yourself. We then went to India, where we talked about Hinduism. We talked about how karma is the work that you do, and that Hinduism started out as a way to justify the social structure, and that you have to go through the samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, as you're trying to climb the ladder to achieve union with Brahman. But it was very hard. Wealthy people had a much better time, because it's always easier to be good when you have food to eat and a house to live in. It was burdensome to the poor people. This brings us to where we left off with Buddhism, where Siddhartha Gautama, a rich guy, goes out, he's 29, 30 years old, and has an experience. He has an interaction with a sick man, a poor man, and a dying man, and it freaks him out that people actually live that way. So he went, wandering for 40 days, and while he was there meditating underneath a pipal tree, all of his past lives were revealed to him, what he did good and what he did bad. And when he awakens, he is the Buddha. He is the enlightened one. He now knows how to escape the transmigration. And his version of Brahman in Hinduism is nirvana. And he's going to show you how to get right to nirvana. And he said there are 4 noble truths. We'll go over them in a second. And once you understand those, and you follow his 8-fold path, there are things that you have to do. If you have right understanding, right thought, right action, right speech, right livelihood, effort, and mindfulness, doing the right thing. Think good thoughts. Don't use angry speech. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't lie. Work hard. Put in the right effort. If you focus on those things, all right, you are going to reach nirvana. And what you have to do is you have to get rid of your wants, your needs, and your desires. Can't find my little clicker pointer. We'll get to that in a second. If you get rid of your wants, your needs, your desires, and focus only on what you need to survive, things are going to go much better. For some people, it may take several lives, but for some, you can go from your human life right to nirvana. It is a shortcut. It is an average Joe's way of achieving Brahman. And a lot of poor people loved it because it removed them, freed them from their caste system responsibilities. So we have section 1, China. In India, section 2, we have Hinduism and Buddhism, very similar, but have some distinctive differences. And so the 4 noble truths is you have to understand that all life is suffering. All right? Life is hard. Life is a test. It's going to wear you down. Where we start to suffer is we desire. We're never satisfied. We always want. We want more. We want more. We want more. And the way to end desire will end our suffering. It's very hard, but just focus on where you are and be content. And the eightfold path here, knowing the truth, say nothing to hurt others, control your thoughts, don't do evil things, work for the good of evil, or work for good instead of evil, will help you escape the transmigration. And this brings us to section number 3, the religion of the Israelites, Judaism in Mesopotamia. And Judaism is going to form the foundation of one of the 3 great monotheistic faiths, where we get the concept of Yahweh or God, a monotheistic God, one all-powerful, all-knowing, all-controlling God, who formed a covenant, which is an old world contract. It's a binding agreement that has 2-way responsibilities. I will do this for you if you do this for me. And he forms it with a guy called Abraham. He says, Abraham, if you believe and worship in me, I will protect you. I will make your descendants more than the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore. You are my chosen people. Instead of having many polytheistic gods like everyone else, one all-powerful, all-knowing God. And the Old Testament is the historical narrative of the Hebrew people. And what God is going to do when people forget the covenant, they begin to break their responsibilities, he will send a prophet, a divine messenger, to say, hey, I'm going to bring you back. This is what you need to do. And one of the great prophets is a man named Moses, who led the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt. And Moses on Mount Sinai will receive the Torah and the 10 Commandments. It is the rule book. This is what God wants you to do. It's what he expects you, and he tells you how to do it. So there is no excuse for not knowing. And he says that your punishment for breaking the covenant, you're going to be punished, but through you, one day all people will be brought to me. And the purpose of punishments isn't just to beat down and to make someone upset, but the purpose of the punishment is to teach you what not to do. And so 2 centerpieces of Judaic monotheism is that God has a divine plan. He knows what you're going to do before you do it. And he is perfect. Number 2, justice and goodness. And when you screw up, he has to punish you to teach you what you did is wrong, but he is always going to bring you back. You will always be forgiven. And so the Hebrews will be a people who will be defined not from a long dynasty, not from a technological accomplishment or a written code of law, but they are more so defined by their shared faith and a practice. This is what you as an individual and you as a people must do. A shared faith and a religious practice from which will grow 2 other monotheistic faiths, Christianity and Islam. And it will spread around the globe. But it sets the Hebrews apart from everyone else in their territory. And from that, we have the 10 Commandments. Here's Moses, the famous Charlton Heston character. And then the famous tabernacle built by King Solomon, another prophet, to house the 10 Commandments and the Ark of the Covenant. Even though the kingdom of the Hebrews will be destroyed in 1722 by the Assyrians, their faith remains. And this takes us out of Mesopotamia and transfers us all the way over into southern Europe to Greece, where we have the concept of Greek thought. And we have Thales, who is the first philosopher. Now, philosopher simply means lover of wisdom. And Thales was meditating or thinking by a stream, and he saw some sediment and pebbles, and they, collected around the curve, and he saw the path of the water change. The path was altered, and he said, wait a minute. Poseidon didn't do that. A river nymph didn't do that. It happened on its own. So he believed the entire world was rational and it was knowable. There was a reason why everything happened. And much like the legalists, the early Greeks said, well, we have our gods. We know they're there. and they're nice, but they don't matter. It is humans that dictate the purpose of things, not heavenly laws. It is what we as humans do. And they begin to think if the world is rational and knowable, we can apply that to political activity, especially in the city-state of Athens, where we have one of the big three philosophers, a guy named Socrates. And Socrates lives between the famous Persian and Peloponnesian Wars, and he helps write the laws of democracy in Athens under Pericles after the Persian Wars. And he believes that a city-state can put binding laws on its citizens. If you choose to live in this city-state, then the city-state's laws should have an effect on you. You should listen to them. But he did not like democracy because he believed that most people were not smart enough to make decisions for him. You could ask them what they were doing and they could tell you, but they didn't know why. And he creates the Socratic method where you keep asking questions to a leader during a debate. Well, why are you doing that? How are you going to accomplish that? How long is it going to take? How much money is it going to cost? And it makes a lot of city fathers of Athens angry because their leader Pericles had died due to a plague. And the Spartans were knocking on the door during the Peloponnesian Wars, and guys inside were spending more time arguing and fighting over who was going to replace Pericles rather than the Spartans right outside the door. And Socrates, much like Confucius, saw himself as a teacher, not as an innovator. Right? And he didn't write anything down, just like Confucius, his students did. He said, look, question your leaders, be respectful, but it is your obligation to question them. The city fathers got so angry at Confucius that the government had him put to death. They gave him a choice. You can leave the city forever or choose death. And he knew that the penalty for treason was death because he wrote it. And if he chose to be ostracized, then that would mean that he was a hypocrite and they could discredit him. So Socrates chooses death. And this upsets his favorite student. Here's the most famous painting. It's called the Death of Socrates by one of the Renaissance Ninja Turtle artists. And here is Socrates, who used to teach right under the Acropolis. And his ideas carry on into the modern day. But his best student is a guy named Plato. And Plato just really was upset that Socrates died. He begins to wander for 10 years. And as he does so, he searches for the world's perfect government, where he writes 26 essays. Allegory in a Cave is the most famous, and then The Republic are his two most famous, where he kind of asks himself and answers his own questions. And his job was to find the perfect government, which he claims to find on the mythological community of Atlantis, where he said people should be placed in a caste system, where there are philosopher kings who would enjoy a life of learning and study, but they know their responsibility is to lead others. Underneath them were warriors, and underneath them was everybody else. And to Plato, you should subordinate yourself to the will of the community. It's not what you wanted to do or how high you wanted to reach. You should just do what the community needs and be satisfied. Don't try to climb the social ladder. Don't try to socially achieve. Just do what you are told. It is another version similar to the caste system. Do what the community needs you to do. No more and no less. And he said that human logic and reason was more important than the gods. The gods didn't matter. It is what we as people do. So subordinate yourself to the will of the community. And he will eventually go back to Athens and invent a school called Plato's Academy that will last for about 900 years. And at Plato's Academy, his best student is a guy named Aristotle. And Aristotle disagrees with his mentor. And Aristotle said that you can figure everything out by observing their behavior. Anybody can put on a show for a couple hours, but if you watch them and see what they do, eventually they're going to show you who they really are. The old saying, a tiger cannot change in its stripes. So just watch them. And he said the problem with most governments is that church and state are intertwined. There should be absolutely no separation of church or state at all. That is where people begin to get into trouble. Keep them separate. The religion and the government should not intertwine. We should not have a theocracy. And he said the job of a government isn't to lock you in your place in a caste system, but a government's job should teach you to be self-sufficient, very similar to Taoism. I will show you how to do it with the expectation that sooner or later you're going to be able to do it yourself, like the essays we are working on in here. I'll help you along, but sooner or later you've got to do it. Governments should help you. You should help those in need. There is a need for charity, but the charity means I'm going to get you ready, and sooner or later I'm going to take the training wheels off of your bike, and you are going to have to do it all by yourself. And he said, climb the social ladder. The governments, if you want to do better, if you want to raise your social class, if you want to work hard, if you have talent and perseverance, then the government's job should help you to do that. Help you better yourself. That when everyone is working to better themselves and create society, everyone's going to be happy. Don't lock them down. Don't suppress them. And what he said is you have to aim for the majority. And he said a good government should look to the middle class. The middle class has the ability to pull the lower up and the upper down. And he who can control or work with or buy into the middle class to get them to buy into his message or her message will always win. And so that is a quick review. I know it's in two parts here of religion and philosophy. If you guys have questions, you know what to do. Get in here and ask me, please.